In November 2022, $8 billion in customer funds simply disappeared overnight. The man responsible, Sam Bankman-Fried, founder of FTX, had been on the cover of Forbes, wined and dined senators on Capitol Hill, and donated $40 million to political campaigns. He had been called the next Warren Buffett. And in 72 hours, it was all gone. This is not one story. This is 5 stories, 5 exchanges, 5 collapses, and a pattern so obvious in hindsight that it will make you genuinely angry. The year is 2014. Ms. Gox, based in Tokyo, but handling 70% of all global Bitcoin transactions, announces it has lost 850,000 Bitcoin. At today's prices, that's over $50 billion gone. The founder, Marc Carpeles, a French programmer living in Tokyo, claimed hackers took it. But here's the fact that almost nobody remembers. Internal audits later revealed Mt. Gox had been insolvent for years before the collapse. They were running what investigators described as a fractional reserve, spending customer deposits on operating costs and hoping nobody asked for their money back at the same time. Sound familiar? It should, because that exact playbook gets used again and again. And later in this video, I'll show you the one document that proves these collapses are not accidents. Fast forward to 2016. Bitfinex, one of the largest exchanges in the United States at the time, headquartered in Hong Kong, but serving hundreds of thousands of American traders, is hacked for 119,775 Bitcoin, worth roughly $72 million at the time, nearly $6 billion today. Now here's where it gets creative. Instead of declaring bankruptcy like a normal company would, Bitfinex did something unprecedented. They socialized the loss. Every single customer on the platform, even those who had nothing to do with the hack, had their account balances cut by 36%. You didn't get hacked, but Bitfinex decided you were partially responsible anyway, and in exchange, they gave customers IOUs, tokens called BFX, that they claimed would be redeemed later. A Harvard Business Review analysis of the incident called it a masterclass in liability transfer, meaning the exchange transferred its problem directly onto its customers, and the SEC did nothing. 2018, QuadrigaCX, a Canadian exchange serving thousands of American customers. The founder, Gerald Cotton, dies unexpectedly in India at age 30, and with him, apparently, dies access to $190 million in customer funds. The exchange claimed Cotton was the only person who knew the passwords to the cold wallets. No backup, no succession plan, just gone. The story made global headlines. People called it a tragedy. But investigators from the Ontario Securities Commission later published a devastating report. Cotton had been running a Ponzi scheme for years. He had been creating fake accounts, trading against his own customers with fictitious funds, and siphoning real money into personal accounts. He bought a yacht, a plane, real estate across Canada, and the cold wallets everyone assumed held customer funds, they had been empty since at least 2018. The death was real. The funds were already gone, and nobody had checked. Now, we arrive at the one you've been waiting for, FTX. Founded in 2019 by Sam Bankman-Fried out of Berkeley, California, later moving operations to the Bahamas, FTX grew from zero to a $32 billion valuation in just 3 years. SBF was everywhere. Super Bowl commercials, stadium naming rights. They paid $135 million to put the FTX name on the Miami Heat's arena. He testified before Congress on crypto regulation. He socialized with top Silicon Valley VCs. Sequoia Capital called him a generation-defining entrepreneur in a now-deleted profile. And here's the open loop I promised you earlier. By the time Sequoia published that piece, FTX's sister company, Alameda Research, had already borrowed billions in customer funds without authorization. The fraud was already in motion. The question is, who knew? Here's what nobody talks about when they cover FTX: the mechanism. Because the headline, $8 billion stolen, doesn't capture the engineering of it. FTX had a backdoor built directly into its accounting software. A line of code that allowed Alameda Research, SBF's trading firm, to borrow from FTX customer deposits without triggering the automatic alerts that would flag any other account going negative. In normal financial systems, that's impossible. Your brokerage cannot lend your stocks to a hedge fund without your consent. Regulation T prevents it. But crypto existed outside those rules, and SBF had lobbied hard to keep it that way. Federal prosecutors at the SDNY, the Southern District of New York, described it as the largest financial fraud in American history. Caroline Ellison, Alameda's CEO and SBF's former girlfriend, testified that she knew about the back door, that SBF had directed the transfers personally, and that when FTX customers started withdrawing funds in November 2022, the money simply wasn't there. Celsius Network, Newark, New Jersey. Founded in 2017, Celsius marketed itself as the bank for the people. Their pitch was simple: deposit your crypto, earn up to 18% annual yield, far better than any savings account at Chase or Bank of America. By 2022, they had $25 billion in assets under management and 1.7 million customers. Now forget everything I just said, because the 18% yield was not generated by smart investing. It was generated by taking customer deposits and placing extremely high-risk leverage bets in the DeFi market, decentralized finance protocols that had no insurance, no backstop, no FDIC equivalent. When crypto markets dropped 70% in early 2022, those bets collapsed. In June 2022, Celsius froze all withdrawals. 1.7 million customers woke up and found they could not access their own money. The CEO, Alex Mashinsky, had sold $44 million of his own Celsius tokens in the months before the freeze. He knew. He cashed out. His customers did not. And this is where it gets truly insane. Because across all 5 of these collapses, Mt. Gox, Bitfinex, QuadrigaCX, FTX, Celsius, there is one document that appears in every single investigation: a proof of reserves audit, or more accurately, the complete absence of one. A proof of reserves audit is exactly what it sounds like: an independent verification that an exchange actually holds the assets it claims to hold. Every regulated bank in America undergoes this process. It's mandatory. It's audited by the FDIC, the OCC, the Federal Reserve. But crypto exchanges were never required to do it. And the ones that did publish audits, including FTX, used tiny, unrecognized accounting firms that signed off on numbers without ever verifying the underlying wallets. This is the warning sign I promised at the top of this video. If an exchange cannot show you a verified, real-time proof of reserves from a recognized auditing firm, that exchange is a risk you cannot quantify. Let's talk numbers, because the human cost of these 5 collapses is staggering in a way that headlines don't capture. Mt. Gox, 24,000 creditors are still waiting for partial repayment 10 years later. Bitfinex, customers who accepted BFX tokens eventually got most of their money back, but only after years of uncertainty. QuadrigaCX, 76,000 customers lost an average of $2,500 each, many of them Canadian and American retail investors, not hedge funds. FTX, roughly 1 million creditors, with estimated losses between $1 billion and $8 billion, depending on whose accounting you believe. The bankruptcy estate, run by the same restructuring firm that handled Enron, has recovered some assets, but legal proceedings are expected to last until at least 2027. And Celsius, 1.7 million customers received less than 70 cents on the dollar in bankruptcy proceedings. For someone who deposited $100,000, a meaningful chunk of a retirement account, that's a $30,000 loss with no recourse, no SIPC protection, no FDIC insurance, nothing. Here's the uncomfortable reality of where we are in 2024. The regulatory response has been real, but slow. The SEC, under Gary Gensler, launched over 100 enforcement actions against crypto companies between 2021 and 2024. The CFTC, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, has staked its own jurisdictional claim over crypto markets, creating a turf war that has slowed meaningful reform. Congress passed no comprehensive crypto legislation through 2023. The FIT21 Act, the Financial Innovation and Technology for the 21st Century Act, passed the House in May 2024 with bipartisan support, but its Senate path remains uncertain. What has changed? Coinbase, the largest US-based exchange and publicly traded on the NASDAQ, now publishes monthly proof of reserves. Kraken does too. The pressure of post-FTX scrutiny has forced transparency that lobbying had previously blocked. But here's the part that should keep you up at night. The next exchange failure will probably not look like FTX. The fraud always evolves. It always finds the newest unregulated corner. And right now, that corner is offshore DeFi protocols with zero accountability and billions in American customer funds. Let me give you the framework I wish existed in 2014 when Mt. Gox collapsed. 5 questions that every American crypto holder should ask before leaving a single dollar on any exchange. 1. Is this exchange registered with FinCEN as a money services business? If not, your money has zero federal protection. 2. Does the exchange publish monthly proof of reserves verified by a top 10 accounting firm, not some shop you've never heard of? 3. Is the exchange publicly traded in the United States? Coinbase is. That means 10K filings, SEC oversight, and financial transparency that private companies don't have. 4. Where are your assets held when you're not trading? If the answer is on the exchange, that's counterparty risk. Self-custody, a hardware wallet like a Ledger or Trezor, is the only way to hold crypto with zero exchange risk. And 5, what is the exchange's revenue model? If you cannot understand how they make money without touching your deposits, they are probably touching your deposits. These are not complicated questions. Mt. Gox, FTX, Celsius, none of them could have answered all 5. That's the tell. Sam Bankman-Fried was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison in March 2024, the longest sentence ever handed down in a US cryptocurrency case. Alex Mashinsky of Celsius awaits trial. Gerald Cotton of QuadrigaCX is dead, but class action suits against his estate and legal team continue. Mark Karpeles of Mt. Gox was convicted in Japan on record falsification charges. The wheels of justice moved. Slowly, imperfectly, but they moved. And here's the thread that ties every single story in this video together. The one I planted at the very beginning. Every one of these founders had been publicly celebrated as visionaries before the collapse. Every major media outlet, every VC firm, every regulator had the information they needed to ask harder questions. Nobody did. The Forbes covers, the Senate testimonies, the $600 million stadium deals, They were all a form of social proof that substituted for financial proof. And that's the real lesson. Prestige is not a balance sheet. Phase 1. Synthesis. We started with $8 billion disappearing overnight, and Sam Bankman-Fried on a Forbes cover. And what we found underneath that story was something more systematic. 5 exchanges, 5 collapses, 1 recurring pattern. No proof of reserves, no independent audits. Celebrity endorsements standing in for financial transparency, and regulators who were always one step behind. The one document that exposes every fraud, that proof of reserves, was never required, and it still isn't federally mandated for most platforms. That affects every American with money in crypto right now, tonight. The 5 questions I gave you are not just useful. They are, frankly, the only protection you have until Congress gets its act together. Phase 2. Final statement. Here's the sentence I want you to carry with you. The most dangerous financial product is not the volatile one, it's the one that makes you feel completely safe. Mt. Gox felt safe. FTX felt safe. Celsius felt like a bank. Trust is the mechanism of every financial fraud ever committed. Phase 3. Closing. The next collapse is already being built somewhere, right now, by someone who just watched this video and is taking notes on what to avoid getting caught doing. Stay skeptical. Stay curious. If you found this valuable, follow the channel for more stories like this. Thanks for watching.